So everybody now knows there will be recorded. So, all right, now Morel, up to you.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our new and revitalized Monday speaker series. CPA has been doing a First Monday speaker series for many years. Lee Moldaver would arrange, and they had the roundtable sessions with the speaker almost monthly. In the time of COVID, of course, we haven't done it. So we have been meeting, doing our board meetings by way of Zoom. We did our annual meeting on Saturday by way of Zoom, and I think it was fairly successful. So we are all thrilled to be on screen and here. And at our last board meeting, we were discussing different topics, and somebody brought up the fact that the AIA had done a survey about State Street. From what we had heard, there were quite a few responses. So I was tasked with contacting AIA, and we are delighted that they are participating with us today. And I think we'll get a lot of very good information about what's in store for the State Street revitalization. Not knowing what numbers we have, I think we'll just hold off on people introducing themselves. I don't want to take up valuable minutes, but perhaps then when Dedi has finished his presentation, if you do have a question, and we have time for questions, question and answer, at that time, you could give your affiliation if you so desire. So Mary's going to give us a few ground rules, and I think we're just ready to start. Okay, thank you, Mary.
Okay. I think almost everybody's pretty used to Zoom at this point. So the real question is to please mute yourself and keep yourself muted unless you're asking a question or presenting, so we don't get a lot of background noise. If you want to ask a question, if you can raise your hand, either visually signal or use the raise hand button at the bottom. We've got a small group today, so we're not looking at having the need of breakout rooms or anything like that. But thank you for coming. This is the first of these that CPA has tried to do virtually, and we are getting more people coming. So I'll just keep letting people in as they go along. And at this point, Dedi, I don't know if you want to start, or Cass, if you're doing introductions, or sort of just how you want to present and introduce yourselves, but you've got the screen share, so I'll let you take it away.
Sure, I will start. Thank you, Mary. So first, I just want to introduce myself. I am an architect here in Santa Barbara. I've been practicing here for about 38 years now. I'm a principal with RRM Design Group, but I am also a longtime member of the American Institute of Architects, and particularly our local chapter. I've been on the board for many, many years, and I am co-chairing the AIA's advocacy committee with Cass Ensberg, who's here today also with us, and Ellen Bilston, who's also with us today. And the three of us are actually going to be doing this presentation for you. I'm going to kind of lead it off, and then Ellen and Cass are going to kind of jump in as we go along, and they may jump in at any time if I miss a point or mess up a little bit here. But I want to start by just saying, as I said, we are the co-chairs of the AIA Advocacy Committee, and we have been actively engaged in with the board, in our community. And as a matter of fact, the AIA has a long history of community involvement, going back even before and after the 1925 earthquakes, to develop the vision that ultimately led to the kind of creation of our El Pueblo Viejo district and the beautiful architecture that we are so fond beyond actively engaged in offering our skills, our experience, our knowledge to help the community develop its vision and ideas and help the leadership of our community make decisions that affect our future as a community. One of the things we did in 2011, we created a design charrette at a time when there was kind of an impasse on the city council as it was trying to develop the general plan update process. And so we offered to help create the information and the vision that enabled them to finish that update and pass it unanimously. And that resulted in the creation of the AUD to try to get more housing in Santa Barbara, and particularly rental housing and employer-based housing. And that was very successful. In 2017, we once again were actually approached by some council members who were very concerned about what was happening to our downtown, and particularly State Street, and the businesses that were leaving and storefronts that were closing and empty. Where was all this going, and what could be done about it? And we could see that there are forces at work in our economy and our society that are changing the dynamic of businesses in our downtown. And so we put on a design charrette at that time, focused on State Street in particular. We came up with some really, I think, interesting and I think very informative and in some cases wonderful ideas about what the future of State Street might be. But since then, the city has made a decision to focus housing in our downtown. This is something that we really don't have. We have not really had any serious housing development in the downtown, with the exception of a few affordable projects, affordable to low-income residents. And so that kind of triggered the idea that, in combination with a number of things that have been happening, namely, number one is probably the pandemic. That's a crisis that has really impacted what's happening in our downtown. And in addition to that, the state has declared a statewide housing crisis that is really very, very dramatic. I mean, we literally have a shortfall of about more than 3 million housing units in the statewide, and Santa Barbara is no exception. We are scheduled to accommodate about 8,000 new housing units in our community within the next several years in order to meet this challenge. And our city leadership is determined that a lot of that housing should really be focused on our downtown area. So once again, we kind of rose to the occasion to say, let's look at this particular problem that in part has been created by the pandemic with respect to our businesses downtown, the housing crisis, and even the kind of social justice crisis that we're facing, providing the kind of housing that we need, especially for our lower income residents, et cetera. And let's do a design charrette that would help the community to create a vision, how we like to say, for the next 100 years, because interestingly, as we approach 2025, that is kind of the anniversary of a major crisis in the community that really resulted in a lot of change. And we're in a similar kind of situation, certainly not the physical destruction, but certainly the winds of change that we are currently dealing with that are affecting how our community is going to function in the next few years. So we decided to organize a design charrette. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and share with you some of the work that has been done over the last several months. I'm going to share my screen, and we have a kind of a little slideshow that I'm going to just walk you through. And so first of all, we call it 2020 Design Charrette. And it's about sort of revitalizing, reinvigorating, reinventing, rethinking our central business district to prepare it for the future that we know is in front of us, and to deal with the kinds of problems that we have been experiencing. So I'm not sure why my slides are not changing, but oops. Let's see what's going on here. There's always some little technical glitch that we're never quite entirely prepared for. Let me see what's going on here. Sorry. It was just
You
working
have it set up
beautifully a
with the
moment
little,
ago.
you've got little arrows on your screen, so I don't know if you've got it
That's
set up
not
that
actually
way.
it. I'm going to unshare for a moment and just see what's going on with the
Okay.
slideshow here. Let's see. Something's happening.
You sent it to me, so I have it if you have a problem.
Yeah, this is really unusual.
So while Diddy is getting that sorted out, I'll just fill in maybe a couple other points just so he can focus on that one thing. Yeah, so this was a really different kind of design charrette for our group. We've always done these events in person, and we always felt that we had a great turnout when we had something under 100 of our local architects, planners, engineers involved in these efforts. This time around, we did it very much in this type of platform with Zoom meetings and all in a virtual mode. So, and it turns out that we had closer to 200 people involved this time around, which was very exciting. It really allowed us to reach out to the community and have really broad participation. How's that looking, Dedy? If that's working,
Yeah. Just go back to me. Yeah, so I think what Ellen has just added is really helpful in understanding. We reached out to a really broad segment of the community, stakeholders, activists, business community, and many of the businesses that make up our community participated by becoming sponsors, as you can kind of see from this list of sponsors. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just how we organize this. First of all, Ellen Cass and I are the advocacy committee, as I mentioned, and then we organized a charrette steering committee that consisted of about 7 or 8 other folks who were involved in a regular basis to actually think through and organize the charrette. And how we approached this was to focus again on the State Street corridor, which is really the heart of our downtown. And you can see from this slide here that what we did is we started at the 400 block and kind of included the 300 block as well with that. And then divided it up into these two block, I guess you would say, segments when you look at both sides of State Street. Going up to the 1000 block. And then we organized teams of about 10 people in each team. So the incredible thing about this is we had about 160 participants, and that included certainly architects, design professionals, stakeholders, landscape architects, all those people who have skills to offer in this kind of visioning process. So each of these teams was assigned to one of these areas. You can see by my cursor here, there's a 400 block, and team 2 is on the 500 block, et cetera, up to the 1000 block. And because we had so many people excited about this and wanting to participate, we ended up having to create 2 teams for each block, which made it an even more interesting endeavor because of all the ideas and visioning that was generated. On top of that, we wanted to really focus on State Street as well. And State Street, the entire State Street corridor, including this and even going a little further up. We had 4 teams that created kind of a vision of how State Street could really become an amazing community park-like resource in the future, where portions or a large piece of State Street would be closed to vehicular traffic, but open to pedestrians with all kinds of community-based opportunities, creating a kind of an urban park along the corridor of State Street. So that was what we had 4 of these teams doing. Now, the other teams that were focusing on the blocks, those 12 teams, they had 3 areas of focus. One of them was to look at opportunity sites. As you can see, just looking at this aerial photograph, there are some open parking lots and interstitial spaces that have never really been developed, and to look at those as potential sites for new housing development. And the other thing was we wanted to look at existing buildings, because as we know, with Macy's gone and other buildings being abandoned by the businesses that occupied them, creating opportunities for adaptive reuse, which is to look at some of these buildings and see how they could be converted into housing as well, coming back into this focus of housing. And then each of the teams also looked at their little section of State Street to kind of create a focus on that, to see what that might look like also in the future, in terms of what I just said, turning it into kind of this urban space, urban park-like space. We did all of this as we're doing today, this meeting remotely, since most of us, perhaps all of us, are now getting used to Zoom meetings. We had to figure out how to structure this in a remote work environment. So we used that technology to create a charrette where the teams would be structured to work together over a period of time by basically meeting in the same way that we're meeting here today, and working to produce this work product. Now, I don't know of any kind of precedent that where this has been done before. I'm sure it may very well be in the future, but I think we really broke some new ground here by doing this so incredibly successfully, as you'll see in a few minutes. One of the first things that we did here, we organized our steering committee to take responsibility for some key things that needed to be accomplished. One of those, we wanted to do a community survey to see what the community thinks about what should happen on State Street, what should happen in our downtown, et cetera. And I'd like to ask Ellen to kind of elaborate on that, because I know that's an area that you're particularly interested in. So Ellen, if you would go ahead.
Great, yes. So, our committees, Cass, Steady, and I, got this whole effort underway in the early part of the year, and we're working on it for quite a while, and came to an understanding that we really wanted this to be a charrette that would matter to our community and would matter in terms of the outcome to the city, in terms of future policy making. So in terms of connecting with the community, we decided that running a survey leading up to before we started the charrette was going to be the way to help us shape where our community is. So starting in mid-July and through half of August, we ran this survey. It was featured in many different places in the newspaper and through the city portals. And we got 4,750 responses in English. We also ran it in Spanish, and we got 12 responses in that respect. 98% of the respondents are in Santa Barbara, and we got a broad age demographic response to the survey. So just a few pages pulled out of what was a pretty extensive survey, just to highlight some of the things that we really keyed into then in terms of shaping the direction that the charrette program was going to go. A key question here was the idea that State Street was becoming a pedestrian-only opportunity, and you can see from the results, the top two were yes answers to that question, that members of the public either wanted to keep the current area closed to vehicles, or the second piece down, even expand it beyond what it currently is today. So those were yes answers, including the next one down, and no was just a very small slice of the survey group that we reached out to. So we thought that was a really compelling piece for our charrette to focus on the basis of this survey result. On the next slide, you can see areas where we inquired about people's sense of the importance of housing downtown. So this, on the left side, you see, should there be more housing? And the answer was very strongly yes. Others were no or unsure. And then question 8 on the right side here, if you say that we should have more housing, what type should it be? And you see that gold band there highlighting the fact that small 1 to 2 bedroom rental apartments should be the priority in those members of the public opinion. So as opposed to condos or larger rental units or very small studios. So with that in mind, that really shaped where we went and the way we structured the charrette. As Dede was saying, we had the teams focus on an opportunity site on one of the blocks that they were assigned, on an adaptive reuse, and on a focus of the public outdoor space, paseos, and circulation through the blocks, since that would be the network that a pedestrian State Street would really connect to. So those were the outcomes of the survey that were most compelling to us in terms of guiding our process.
By the way, I might add, the results of this survey are available on our AIASB website, and I urge you to take a look at those. We also asked people to make comments, and there are literally pages and pages of individual comments that people made. Really, really interesting and informative. I think it was a really very worthwhile effort to do this survey. And
Yeah.
There's a whole lot more information than what we were able to show you here today. So we're going to go, what we'd like to do now is just kind of walk you through what the results of the charrette, how it came out.
Dede, excuse me for jumping in. Could I add one piece before we move on?
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to thank you all for having us today. Also, it's just great to be here and to see so many friends on this meeting. I just wanted to emphasize the other very important part of this was the working with the city. This process of defining the development standards for the downtown area has been in the works for some time. And last year there was work I think it was the end of the previous year, was when Planning Commission and City Council met and were working on all of the development standards with regard to having the housing on State Street, adjusting the height of buildings, the open yard, the parking, all of these things were being discussed. And it was decided that the best way to move forward was to take the things that everyone was clear about and to allow those to move forward. And that was what was approved by City Council and was called the Downtown Focused Package. And so that was part 1. And then there was the part 2, which had to do with more difficult things to get your head around, like size, bulk, and scale, FARs, things like that. And so it was decided, and this was all something that we worked closely with the city and with the planners, who we consider to be our strong members of our team, to find out, well, what are the things that we need to provide to you? What can we study here to help the city as they move forward with this next set of development standards that will be worked on now and through the end of the year, specifically about FAR. So part of this multifaceted work was to provide data, hard data, as we looked at these different types of buildings that Dede mentioned, that we would provide hard data to the planning and development so that they would have a better idea about what our metrics for these development standards should be moving forward.
That's a great point, Cass. Thank you for bringing that up, because that is really the purpose in many ways of the charrette, is to create information that the city can use, the decision makers, the staff can use going forward as they continue to formulate what the vision for our downtown should look like. And speaking of vision, this is a lovely watercolor rendering created by one of the teams that focused on the State Street corridor. And you can see, you just kind of want to go into this picture and walk, walk up State Street or down State Street and experience the beautiful kind of park-like setting, urban space that could be created on State Street. Over here, this is just so you get oriented. This is De La Guerra Plaza over here, and these are some of the buildings that surround this area. So I just thought that was a really great, great image. And what we're going to do now is just show you some samples. Ellen and Cass are going to kind of take turns commenting on some of these other work product samples. Again, I want to emphasize that what you're seeing is just a very, very small piece of what was created in this charrette. These teams worked over the course of a couple of months in this, awkward and challenging virtual setting to create this work, and generated, somewhere in the range of 250 to 300 pages of documents that we will be making public in the hopefully very near future. But you'll get a little bit of a taste of that today.
Great. Well, I'll jump in. So starting down in the 400 block, the team there was, really focused on that shared usage of State Street, just all the modes of mobility, whether you be walking or riding your bike, or that there might be trolleys on State Street. So we thought this was a really fun one. Next slide. This one similarly shows that kind of that mix, that in the introduction of landscape and addressing an issue that's otherwise a really big topic now at the city about stormwater management. So you see in that center where the tree is set down in, they're thinking of that as an 8-foot bioswale. So the teams were also thinking about some of those types of infrastructure challenges that we're grappling with in a regulatory environment right now, and how those ideas might find their way into some of these solutions. So just wanted to point that out. This one is an analysis of the existing buildings on the 2 blocks that this team was focused on, using color to call out commercial buildings versus public ones. And then showing open space and different ways of circulating around, and then even more importantly, through these blocks. So we're seeing State Street as a spine off of which there could be all these pedestrian opportunities to infiltrate the block and have access to some of the backs of properties, and thinking about the use that those buildings might be put to. Cass, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, this is a beautiful one that shows kind of the level of, beautiful illustrations that people did to show how the feeling would be, how the change might occur. This is an infill project at Haley and Coda, and just as a lovely illustration that would be beautiful in El Pueblo Viejo. this one also is just, we've included this to show you kind of the different levels of study at the beginning when the teams were looking at the overall area and really trying to assess what was there, what's existing in certain situations. I know in my team where all the historical resources are and where the opportunities might be. So this is just a very loose sketch that shows how they started to take a look at their block and what might be possible there. This one is the 500 block, and again, they're studying, they've got, the gold is showing opportunity zone, where they're thinking that a new building could be built. The green is the adaptive reuse opportunity. You can see that's along State Street, so those are existing buildings that would be potential for adaptive reuse. And then the pink is showing the circulation.
I could speak
Do you
to
want to
this
go ahead
one.
with this one, Ellen? Sure.
Sure. Yeah, so this was an idea for Cost Plus World Market building at the corner of Coda and State, which is now a single-story building. The notion being, you know, keep commercial as is and then have 3 new levels of housing above. So to just kind of, you know, just think about the level of density that's possible on these existing parcels, even where we have very useful buildings currently, but how can we leverage them into being, you know, having even more use. And take note in the lower right, again, just to the, speaking to that metric consideration, this exercise was far beyond graphics. So there, you'll see lots of beautiful images here, but in every case, the images were backed up with numbers. How many, you know, how many units, how much square footage, how much circulation space, all of that was being quantified by the teams every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
This is another example of that, an analysis of a whole block, and just if you really just looked at the full maximum potential, this study yielded the information that one could easily achieve 500 units of 650 square foot living spaces on a single block. So 500 units on a single block. So when, as Debbie referred to earlier, the notion that we need something like 8,000 units, it starts to become very achievable, or, you know, something that we can actually get our arms around how we could do that just on the existing land that we have currently.
And Ellen, if I could just add on to that, that we fully understand that, you know, not all of the housing would go into the CBD. We have this requirement of 8,000, and we would imagine that those numbers would get distributed around the city appropriately in different parts of the city. But I think this tool that the work that Ellen is describing just shows is such a great tool, looking out 100 years or so, that what could be possible.
Yeah, this one here, I'm just going to mention something about this one. This is where the team was looking at the 700 block, which is this, and the 800 block, and you can see that it encompasses Paseo Nuevo. And they had a particularly bold idea that was quite interesting and potentially exciting, which was to maybe acquire a couple, for the city to acquire a couple of buildings that could be removed, and the De La Guerra Plaza could be opened up to you know, bring it right out to State Street in a really dramatic and significant way. I thought that was a very bold idea that I think could be very interesting.
I guess this one, yeah, this one is, everybody just tried to uncover every rock, I swear. They were just looking at every possibility of what, you know, electric charging stations, as you see here, and bus terminal. Circulation was certainly a very, very important part in the big picture. And I'll also mention too, just here, that speaking of the big picture, we talked about, downtown school, a walking, a public school would be important for all of this work. If we want to have housing and families living downtown, we certainly want their children to be able to walk to a public school and not have to have their parents have a car and drive them to McKinley, for example.
Yeah, good point, Cass.
Oh, should I talk about this one, or?
I think so.
Sure.
Okay, this is the Marshalls building, and this team looked at the Marshalls building with the idea that how could it be, converted into residential. And after studying it pretty thoroughly, decided that it would be not cost effective because of the structural issues that would be involved to be able to create the floors inside there. It just seemed to be prohibitive for that particular, for rental housing. The team thought that the building would be fine, perhaps get a facelift or something, but we thought it would be fine to continue as a retail store or maybe a gym. Some of the other teams did recommend some things like that. But this, the team took the opportunity to study, well, okay, if you wanted housing there, then this was the idea of these two buildings that are very simple and basic, but also very articulated, that would be quite lovely in the El Pueblo Viejo. So there you can see the plan and some of the inspiration of art and cultural inclusions for part of this building. And this team did work with the Presidio district and spoke with Hugh Marjoram and to get input from them too. This one also, this is the Tilly's building. It's actually the Hughes building is the formal name. And this one was to show an adaptive reuse where the team extruded the building up to continue with the design as it exists, and then poked through at this, you can see on the street level here, a new Paseo. That image is actually thanks to El Paseo, because that is a photograph that was collaged in there to give the idea of what that might be like, to take you from State Street back to the rear side by the Canary Hotel and that little wonderful Paseo back there.
I can probably speak on this one. This team focused on the 1000 block. And as you know, right now there's the transit center. These buses, they circulate around this existing hexagon building here, and then exit back out onto Chapala Street. This is not a desirable arrangement for MTD. And of course, we have a big empty parking lot here with no development on it. And so this team took the initiative to revision what could happen here that really could make this a vital kind of hub in the city. They saw that having a corridor through to State Street and maybe kind of an urban park in the middle of the block potentially, and then some housing here. And they created the most sort of forward-looking arrangement for the buses. So they can accommodate 10 or 12 buses here in exactly the kind of arrangement that is most ideal for MTD. So you're creating this wonderful transit center with some commercial on the ground floor and then residential up above, et cetera, and a direct connection to the heart of State Street here through to the transit center, which makes so much sense. Actually, I might as well, this was an alternate to that, but very similar ideas, Paseo through to State Street. And then in this case, the idea was to create a large plaza, public plaza right here with outdoor seating, cafes and commercial, et cetera, but a different arrangement for how the buses would operate here. But still you'd create this very large kind of linear axial open space that connects right through to State Street. This one interesting thing about this one was it was predicated on taking all that existing parking and putting it into a fully automated public parking structure that we're seeing more and more of in this country, but that's been around in Europe for quite a while. You can it's just amazing that you can take this whole area of parking and condense it down to this one footprint here. Not only provide all the parking that was there previously, but add additional parking for the new development.
I'll take this one. So this is a study of Paseos, generally just working through that block. So it's another example of, you know, a real network of pedestrian circulation through the block.
Can I talk about, this is my, one of my,
Go for it.
I love this. This one is where the team took a look at what would happen if the Macy's building would be removed, and that would allow the State Street just to flow right into the Paseo Nuevo, which I think is so brilliant, because instead of being, it's sort of an enclave as it is now, but by doing that, it just very powerfully pulls state, you know, just connects the two. And then these rear areas, I think they were considering for housing. So I personally really like this one.
Yeah, it's great.
Very bold idea.
Yeah.
And that's our last slide, and it just shows this concept that I was mentioning previously of creating a direct connection of Paseo on axis with the transit center, and in this case leaving the existing sort of single-story facades, but restructuring these long, deep buildings that really aren't meeting current needs of retailers anymore, and making them just 60 feet deep, and then potentially building housing up behind them. So you can see some of that housing back there, but the street, you know, remains very much the familiar State Street scale that we're used to in this particular case. Cass.
Oh, well, AIA is very, very committed to, you know, we feel that it is our responsibility to be engaged as architects. The regulations and the ordinances are all things that we are working with all the time. So it's something that we feel responsible to bring forth when things are working, and to assist to help the community, you know, have the best kind of regulations that we can to get the best built environment that we can. So this is just showing an image of our advocacy work at the city.
In addition to that, I think there'll also be a lot of outreach efforts that our advocacy group will make to the public to share the wealth of imagery and information that the charrette came up with. So we're planning for various storefronts along State Street that are currently unoccupied to feature images from the charrette. So we're looking forward to getting that exhibit put up so that the public can start to see some of this material. We'll be meeting with groups such as yours to talk about this more and to share the ideas that came out of the charrette. But as Cass said, you know, probably the most important groups that we'll be meeting with are like Planning Commission and City Council, to assist with their thought process as they work with staff to establish new policies, whether they decide FAR is a priority. The charrette addressed that to a certain extent. So there'll be a lot of material, both visual and data driven, for them to draw from at the charrette that can assist them in how they think about how to move our city policies forward. And that was our goal from the beginning.
Yeah, so I do want to just add one final word to this, and that is that you can imagine these 160 volunteers who have put so much time, energy, love, and passion into this work. It's an incredible contribution to the city. These are, our advocacy committee. We're not lobbyists in any kind of paid sense. Nobody's getting paid to do any of this. They do it because they feel, firstly, as Cass said, the responsibility to use their knowledge and experience and skills to help the community by coming up with ideas. It's really up to the community to take these ideas and see how they can be utilized to come up with a vision for our future for the next 100 years. Take this data, these ideas, these images, these concepts, and see how they fit with our future. It really is an exciting thing to see something like this happen. What really struck me when we had one of our meetings where all these participants were online on a Zoom call, and each of the teams shared a few minutes of what the process was like for them and how they worked together. 10 people who were kind of thrown together on a team, often people who didn't even know one another barely, or barely knew one another. And then we're expected to work together as a team to come up with these ideas. It just, it was uplifting, to say the least, to see that it is really possible for people from all kinds of disparate backgrounds, if you will, cooperate, collaborate to create something positive for our future, especially in these times when there's so much division in our society and really concerning and difficult challenges. So I hope you see it the same way when you get a chance to see the final work product. We're going to be publishing a book of all of these drawings, and you'll see that what you saw was just scratching the surface of all the work and effort that's gone into this. So we would be more than happy to entertain your questions or comments. Cass, you were going to say something?
I just wanted to add one other little piece, is that the teams, there were about 10 people on each team, and they came from a wide variety. We had students. We had, on our team, we had 3 young people who were, just out of school. One of them was studying architectural history, not really architecture. And they just were great and really appreciated watching how, the architects work and then having their contribution, and they learned so much through the process. It really was very, very special. It wasn't just, only professional architects. We had a lot of others that were involved in the teams.
Well, thank you very much. That was a very, very interesting report. I see people clapping in the background. I'm sure there are a number of questions. People would like to ask a question. If you can raise your hand or wave at me, or raise your hand in the thing. Linda Honigman, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I want to reiterate what a great exercise that was. I'm so pleased that it happened, and I'm hoping we can all help get the attention of the community and the leaders. And on that front, do you have dates yet for when you would have a community presentation and when you would be going to the city council?
We do not have dates set yet. We have some tentative dates, so we'd rather not have you jot them down, but this month it's high priority for us to get the word out and to not leave people wondering like, oh, didn't the charrette end? What's going on? So it will be soon, that I can assure you, and we're very focused on that at this point until it's agendized. We don't want to mislead anyone, but it's in the works, and it'll be most likely the month of October in the next few weeks.
It will.
Did I say that well, Cass?
Yeah, you did. That was right. That's right. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
There are other questions. This was very interesting. Morel, were you waving at me?
No, I'm
You're
unmuted.
adjusting your computer.
what role did historic landmarks play in the development of much of this? I could see how, you know, some of the designs that I saw.
I could,
Beautiful, but you know, actual historic landmarks, there's so many in that area that you studied. I'd like to have a little information about that.
I could speak to that. We worked with Anthony Grumbine with HLC, he's the chair of HLC, and we organized representatives from HLC, ABR, and Single Family Design Review, and organized representatives from each of them. And they had they set themselves up as two teams. And then they have been, in the past week or so, reviewing, not reviewing, but looking over the work and having, you know, their, you know, comments, positive comments about what they see that they like, you know, what things that they feel work well. And so we're still waiting for their comments back, but we're really pleased, you know, to have had them. They're super important to be part of this whole thing, as is everyone in the community. So we're waiting to get their comments, and we're excited to hear, you know, what their feelings were.
In addition to that, something we didn't really talk that much about is that we had on, as part of the charrette, a whole advisory group. So experts and key people at the city. So for example, Rob Dayton was available to talk about any transportation issues. So as teams had questions, they had these resource people to go to. And on that group was also Nicole Hernandez. So I know our group reached out to her quite a lot, and I'm sure the other teams did as well, for specific drawings and guidance on what would be appropriate relationships of new buildings to our existing historic resources. She helped us establish and have access to maps that showed us which were the historically designated buildings on each of our blocks. So that was all completely taken into account. It was kind of baked into the whole approach. So thank you for asking the question, because we didn't really talk much about that. But yeah, there was a lot of guidance on what the historic resources were and what were appropriate relationships to them. So that was part of what we were working with.
And to add to that, we also had input from Nina Johnson has been working with these, what we call there's little mini districts all around town. You know, there's the Presidio, there's the little area down by the freeway called the Sevilla district. And so she created a map for us of that, so that we were aware of what, you know, different little pockets within the city are working on, and the emphasis that they're working on to make their area special. So we had a report about that, and there was a lot of information like this, and what Ellen was describing we had a Dropbox for the teams where they could have access to all of these different maps and information like that.
I have a question. How much cooperation did the property owners provide? I'm sure there was a wide variety of reactions, but can you go through a little bit of how they participated or chose not to participate in some cases, I'm sure?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that, sure, you know, the property owners were certainly paying attention. Some of them are very concerned about what the future looks like, especially with the results of the pandemic. For example, you may have office space that may no longer be viable at some point in the future if people really take to this remote work mode of working together, or the amount of office space needed could be dramatically reduced. So, and also the economic conditions that have led to business closures and big tenants moving out, et cetera, of the city. So yes, there's concern. I think in general, they're very supportive. The business community wants to see a vital, exciting downtown that really works. And a big part of that is getting people down there to live down there. That is what's going to ensure the long-term economic vitality of our downtown is to have that, you know, intensity, I guess, of life. People living there, meeting their daily needs by using the restaurants and shopping in those stores that can't be replaced by online shopping and that type of thing. So, generally, I would say they were really supportive. We didn't approach individual property owners and say, hey, we're going to look at your property and come up with an idea. That just would have probably been sort of counterproductive. This was all about just coming up with concepts and ideas that may or may not become reality at some point in the future, but they're on the table to help inform our community of what could be and what it might look like and how it would work and all of that, as we had mentioned before. So similarly, with other charrettes that we've done, we've taken the same approach, just certainly involve and invite everyone to participate in what we're doing. But let's just be free to be creative and come up with ideas to put on the table.
I was just wondering, and as somebody who's lived downtown for the last 30 plus years, I think it's very interesting because it is a very wonderful place to live.
Mary?
So I think it will continue.
Yeah.
Mary, could I ask a couple of
Mary
questions?
Louise, yes, you have the floor.
Getting back to the survey, is your booklet going to indicate the answers having to do with building height? It's my understanding that a majority preferred 3 stories, and that hasn't been mentioned. And my second question is, are your drawings going to indicate the presence of city landmarks and structures of merit? Because some of your drawings, read in the general sense, indicated wiping out some of those.
I don't know about that in particular, but I will say that most of the teams, I tried to identify very early on in their analysis, because that's how architects work. There's kind of an initial analysis of what is the setting, what are the important spaces, what are the important buildings, and those landmarks are identified. And I think you may have seen one of the maps that showed a little bit of that, but there are many other maps that people have done that identify the historic buildings, the interstitial spaces, and all of that. Now, the whole survey, of course, is available to the public, to anybody, for anybody to look at. You mentioned something about the preference for 3 stories, and that, of course, is an important question. That what is the height? Right now, the height limit in the downtown is 60 feet. And then recently the city passed the amendments to the AUD that will allow, without any special consideration, up to 48 feet, which is a very slight increase from what was in place previously of 45 feet, recognizing that 4-story buildings are necessary to create economically viable development. If we actually want the housing to be located downtown, you have to create the conditions that will allow it to happen. If you constrain it to a point where it can't happen, then the whole point of focusing housing downtown is lost, because you won't get it. It won't happen. Developers will not build it if it's not economically feasible to do. So yeah, there's going to be a lot more debate, no doubt, as the community goes forward and comes together around these issues, and comes together ultimately, hopefully, around a coherent, enduring vision for what our downtown is going to be like. I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussion on issues like historic buildings and building heights and what buildings should look like and all of those things.
We've had a question from somebody who's sent it to me privately. Did you please further explain how the promenade would work? Currently, areas such as the 500 block have numerous restaurants outside. The number doesn't seem to be illustrated currently. And it sounds like city transportation is bringing forward bike lanes down the middle of the street soon. So
Well, there's a,
question
I
from,
can take that, and maybe Cass or Ellen can add to it as well, but there is a committee called the State Street Committee of the City Council that is working on analyzing and trying to come up with guidelines and regulations as to how these things are going to be handled in the immediate future. And of course, they'll be eventually moving into how these kinds of issues will be handled in the long-term future. I don't think there's nothing set in stone yet about how that's going to be handled. The idea is to create, right now, is to they've already created the promenade as in an effort to try to create some vitality back in our downtown in the meantime during this crisis. But there's a strong sentiment, and you saw it in the survey too, to make that a long-term vision, to create that space long-term. And of course, there's many questions that have to be answered, like the interaction of bicycles and pedestrians, and where the restaurants are going to go, and outdoor eating and landscaping and service vehicles and emergency vehicles. All those things have to be accommodated. And I think that's all going to unfold over time.
thank you.
And if I could just add on to that, you know, this charrette work, as I said before, it was kind of uncovering all the rocks, you know, sort of what are all the possibilities. So that's what we put out there. We aren't saying what should happen. We're putting all of the different ideas out there for the community to now, you know, figure out. And as Debby said, this subcommittee is currently working on the issues that we're seeing today, right now, and trying to figure out how to move that forward. And we are wanting and most welcome to have that all of this information be available to them as they're, you know, to have in their minds as they're thinking forward how to address these issues now and then into the future.
Okay, we've got another couple people are sending me questions because they don't have their own audio, I think. What other cities were looked at as models? And second question, how do you plan to do the outreach for that public understanding? So.
Well, maybe I'll take the models question, and Cass or Ellen can take the outreach aspect of it. You know, all of the different architects and design professionals work in other cities, of course. And so they have, you know, they have that sort of broader perspective, perhaps, that they can bring to the table. One of the things you'll notice when you see the full work product is that many of the teams drew from images of delightful, wonderful places around the world, particularly in Europe. Those of you who've traveled extensively around Europe and even Asia will know about these promenade streets and public plazas and public places and how they work. And so there are a lot of images, and I think probably a certain amount of inspiration taken from those kinds of experiences that have been brought to the table here as well.
Mm-hmm. I would say also, I mean, we're outreaching right now. Here we are with you. So we are right now in the process. You know, we got all this massive amount of information. So all of us on the steering committee are now going through. We have a list of all of the categories of focus that we were paying attention to. We're trying to organize examples from all of the teams that illustrate these different concepts and putting them together in this exhibit that we are going to be having on State Street soon coming up, and that'll be a big public outreach. We also are hoping to, well, we are planning a big Zoom meeting for everyone. For, you know, maybe we need that thousand space Zoom meeting, but for everyone to just formally put it out there, and then to announce that this exhibit will be on State Street. The exhibits will also have a link that someone could go on their phone to all of the information that will also be published in a 11 by 17 booklet. We'll have that available on the AIA website and for anyone to go to look at. And then as people are downtown and maybe want to learn more, they would be able to access, they would go to that website and they could access all the material and then walk around the different blocks and sort of compare and learn what people were suggesting and what that might look like. So we anticipate a lot of, outreach moving forward with, as Debbie and Ellen said, with council, planning commission, and other organizations that reach out to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are a little bit past 1 o'clock, but we do have one more question and then maybe a few closing comments if you want. We do try to keep this is our first Zoom, but we do try to keep them to about an hour. And there's a question, are you envisioning that there will be a specific plan for State Street that comes out of the charrette? And also, how do the state laws on housing fit in with the charrette ideas? The question is regarding streamlining approvals, things of that nature. So that's a big topic and probably an hour in and of itself. But I throw that at you as the last question of the day.
Well, certainly state law is applicable throughout our city, actually. And there are many, many pieces of legislation that have been developed over the last couple of years to support housing in particular, because we have a housing crisis in the state, and the communities of our state have not been meeting their commitments, not doing their part to get the housing built. So therefore, the state has created this legislation. But I think the beauty of it is if we have a coherent vision, and if we have made the allowances to allow housing to be built where we want it to be constructed, I think the outcome of that will be harmonious with state law, ultimately. That's kind of my sense about it. There was another part to your question, I kind of lost track of it. The state law.
It was a question as to whether you envision a specific plan or something of that nature coming out of the charrette.
That's a possibility. I know that's been discussed, and that would be, a common way for a community to really nail down all of the factors, development standards, and all of that, and to kind of codify a vision. And that may happen in Santa Barbara too, but it's a kind of a long, drawn-out process. In the meantime, though, the city has embraced this idea of let's get some housing downtown. Let's create regulations that make that possible. And that's what they did with the passage of the AUD amendments and then the application of those amendments to the downtown area. So a lot of the pieces are already in place, and the city will continue to work on refining those regulations over the next few months. And I think our city decision makers are anxious to get those regulations worked out and in place so that we kind of know where we're going as we go forward.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, we're at about 1:09. Any final comments? Morel, do you want to have a few final words? This has been recorded, and we will post it on the CPA website at some point in the not too distant future, within the next few days, probably.
Super.
Great, thank you.
That'll help with your outreach too.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you all for coming. I think the presentation was excellent. I think CPA members maybe individually participated. I hope they did, in the charrette process. I think going forward, I know CPA would really like to get a little bit more involved somehow. So do call on us to help in whatever part of the project that we can help with. I'm envious that you were able to get so many young people involved.
Yeah, that was a really exciting
We are 60 years old right now, and we try to reach out to these young people, get them interested in planning issues. Obviously, you found a secret remedy, so I look forward to sharing or having you share with me how you did that. With that said, I think we should probably wrap it all up. Maybe we'll have a follow-up. We do want to have these Monday sessions. I think it works with Zoom. And thank you. And I say goodbye. Mary, anything?
Thank you very much for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity, and you've been such a great audience and obviously very interested in what we have to say. We would be more than happy to come back at any time for a follow-up or, you know, further kind of drilling down on some of the issues and questions that we've touched on a little bit today. We just really appreciate it, and we kind of want to count you as stakeholders in this whole process, which you certainly are. And so we welcome your input, your support for what we're doing, and if you have comments to add, we certainly want to take note of those. So.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you again. And as Morel said, Citizens Planning Association, its goal is to get citizens involved in planning for the city's future, for the county's future. And it has done that for 60+ years. And it's been a little rough with COVID in the last, so this was our first Zoom series, but we look forward to having them again monthly. And we do have outreach vehicles that go out, and we'd be happy to help you promote if you're doing public meetings. We'd like the community to know about those. So
Certainly be in touch to make sure your group knows about those events that are coming up.
yeah. So if there are events that are open to the public, just let us know. And we want to thank you again. It was very informative, and I think we all enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, CPA, for your important work. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.